There's a very, very simple technique used in bread making. Some of you are completely familiar with it, some of you are not. Um, I think it's really a good idea to get your feet wet a little bit with bread making so that if you get to the point where you can't get commercially made bread for one reason or another, that you have the skills and the confidence to just jump right in where you are. Lots of you have maybe had bread makers that take some of the guesswork out of it for you. A bread maker really makes a ideal chamber with a perfect temperature for everything to do exactly what it needs to do. I have enjoyed using my bread maker in the past with a 58-minute oatmeal rapid recipe for bread. I mean, it has oatmeal in it, like 2/3 of a cup in a loaf, which is quite a little bit of oatmeal. Anyway, there's a technique for starting the yeast into motion, and it's called proofing the yeast. And I just wanted to do a tiny little explanation, and I'll try to quit, not belabor this, but it's basically mixing usually the whole amount of yeast that's going to be in the recipe with water and sugar, possibly sometimes flour, but usually it's just water and sugar. The main reason you want to do this is really kind of twofold: to prove to yourself that the yeast is good, but if you're using it on an everyday basis, you know whether your yeast is good or not, or a week-to-week basis. If you're using it frequently, you know whether your yeast is still good. Keep it in the freezer and it'll be good for a long time anyway. But the other reason is to get the temperature right, because I don't understand it completely, but yeast is a living organism and it needs the proper temperature to get started. And the proper temperature is going to be quite warm, but not hot. Warmer than lukewarm, but not hot. Not hot enough to burn your fingers. Somewhere in between there. And you'll get the feel for it. If you're taking yeast right out of the freezer, it needs to be a little bit more on the warm side to compensate for your cold yeast, or you can let it sit out for a little while first, or you can scoop your tablespoon or two, whatever it is, of yeast into a little dish and let it sit for a few minutes or a couple of hours to warm up before you get started. But at any rate, I pretty much, unless I'm using the bread maker, and I haven't done that in quite a while, I pretty much proof my yeast every time because I like to see it foam, and you need to make sure the container is big enough because it'll foam. You know, you get this much foam on top of it. You just basically take your, whatever the measurement calls for, your warm water, quite warm but not hot, put it in a bowl. I think mine is like a 1-quart bowl. And sprinkle your yeast in there, sprinkle your sugar in there, whatever it calls for, and then stir it up and let it sit while you get your other ingredients out, or you go make a phone call or whatever. Let it sit for a little while until it begins to foam, and then you can dump it in when the instructions call for it in your recipe. I really, 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 really like the French bread recipe. I keep pushing it down everybody's throat on Great Depression video 5, I think it is. And I'll talk more about that later, I'm sure. But so the purpose of proofing your yeast is to make sure that it's good and to provide the right temperature for the yeast to get started. Then when you dump it in with your flour and your other ingredients, it's already going, it's already growing. And that's the end of this video. I'm sorry, I think I'm getting a little tired. Have a great afternoon, day. Hope everything's going great for you, just the way you want it to. Make a list and check it twice so you can eat more than just beans and just rice.